So hi everybody at home virtually and everybody here in the room at the Buffalo Soldiers Museum. Thank you so much for coming to our CLE on Diversity in the Workplace presented by Ruthie White and Rachel Thompson from Fane. For those of you virtually right now, we are having some technical difficulties in the room, so everybody's watching the slides on their phones. All right, so my name is Darcy Douglas. I'm the Vice President of Advancement and Alumni Engagement at South Texas College of Law. We are here, like I mentioned, at the Buffalo Soldiers Museum here in Houston. The Buffalo Soldiers Museum is dedicated to exploring and displaying the stories and contributions of African Americans in the military by way of the performing and visual arts, educational programming, and exhibitions. And I thought that this was a perfect place for us to do a CLE on diversity in the workplace. And we are so happy to have Ruthie and Rachel here today with us to share with us their thoughts on diversity in the workplace. So Ruthie White is a 1996 graduate of South Texas. She is a current South Texas board member and a partner at Fane, where she focuses her practice on labor and employment disputes. She has been adjunct professor at South Texas, and she is the founder of the Downtown Group, a 200-member networking organization for African American female lawyers. She also volunteers her time at the Houston Volunteer Lawyers Association and presenting CLEs just like this one. Rachel Thompson is a 2019 graduate of South Texas and is an associate at Fane, where she helps employers manage workplace disputes. So with that, I will turn over the podium to our esteemed presenters today and let you guys get to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darcy. So those of you who are online, I'm going to get a profile. The camera is to my right, and I'm not sure if it's my best view or not, but that's okay. I look gorgeous no matter how you look at me. I will look at the audience because they're here in person, and I'm so happy to have a presentation in person. So you guys are going to get a full face view of Ruthie White. So let's start out by telling you about me. I am Ruthie White. I am the daughter of a Baptist preacher, so I am a Christian. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a sister. I am African American. For those of you who say you don't see race, I bet you're not surprised when I tell you I'm an African American. I'm a female, so that also comes in mind for those of you who say I don't look at gender. There's no way that you cannot see that I am an African American female. Voluptuous, I'll give you, but I am an African American female. I am a caregiver of a 90-year-old mom. I am a partner. I first became a partner in 2007 at the law firm of Jones Day. I was one of 3 African American women among 600 or so partners. And of course, when I would go to the partner meetings, I would look for someone like me. And Blacks, of course, you know, we can't have a Black caucus because too many of us stay together. Everybody knows and wonders what we're looking at, what are we doing? So we have to meet. When I first came to South Texas College of Law, I had a student tell me once, well, you know, it concerns me, Ruthie, that when I go to the law school events, all the Blacks are huddled together and they're not mingling. And I said to that student, let's go and see the next event. So we went to the next event. I said, see those white folks over there? They're all from UT. They huddle together at everything we have. See those white folks over there? They're from the University of Houston. They always huddle together. Unfortunately, because of my color, I can't do what other people do because it brings about notice. I have to consider how I'm going to be considered when I go to these events. I had a boss when I first got out of law school who said to me, Ruthie, we see you as a partner, but people consider you a segregationist because you always go to lunch with Black people. And I said to him, as people were going to lunch, see those white people over there? Bunch of them going to lunch. He turned red in the face. I said, hold on a minute, look at that. There's a group of white people going to lunch. I guarantee you, nobody's ever walked up to them and said to them, we're concerned that you're only hanging around white people, and we really want you to progress. Unfortunately, I wear my race on my shoulder because I can't say all the things I want to say, but because I'm Black, I know it gives more weight as a partner as a law firm. I'm still considered the secretary sometimes when people want to make copies, because I am the only equity African-American female in my firm. I've been on elevators with opposing counsel where they're talking about defense strategy. And they don't know I'm the other attorney. And of course, I think it's so stupid because I'm on the website. And you're talking about defense strategy? So when they call so-and-so versus Verizon Wireless, and I stand up, the two white males are shocked. We just got through talking about defense strategy on the elevator with opposing counsel, because it never occurred to us that she's the partner at that law firm. We're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion today. And I don't know what the slide is on, but we're going to change it. So those of you who are on Zoom, we're going to the next slide. And the first thing you have to do, if you care, because it's so important to understand, if you don't care about diversity, if you don't care about equity, if you don't care about inclusion, none of this matters. You're just here to get a CLE. You have to care, otherwise it doesn't matter at all. And I don't see the screen changing. There we go. The number one you have to do to develop a diverse culture is to understand the D&I basics. Let's talk about diversity. Everybody's learned the dance analogy, unless you've been under a rock for 20 years, right? So the dance analogy, let's discuss it. Diversity is having a group of people, right, that you've invited to the dance. And those people are not just of different race, gender, religion, national origin, all those things, thought processes, backgrounds. You have invited a diverse people, so it's not numbers. Diversity is really about numbers. When the first client in the late 80s said, how many diverse lawyers do you have? Most law firms have said, uh-oh, it's a money issue now. We gotta get them in. So they started bringing in diverse lawyers, simply because the clients started asking, how many do you have? So numbers, the dance analogy is diversity is numbers. Who are you inviting to the dance? Equity, on the other hand, does everybody have an opportunity to dance? If there's a person in a wheelchair, have you made sure that when you invite them to the dance, they can get in the door? Have you made sure the dance floor is big enough for those people in the wheelchair to dance? For those people who don't have rhythm, have you offered a dance course before the dance? Equity is not only an opportunity, it's an opportunity to succeed. If you don't end with opportunity to exceed, then you're not talking about equity, right? So if I invite you to dance and I can't even get in the door because of a wheelchair, you haven't given me equity, an opportunity to succeed. And then of course, inclusion is someone asks you to dance. Someone asks your thoughts about the dance. Someone asks you to help organize the dance, right? So that's the dance analogy. The definitions are on the screen. I don't have to go over those. But if you never asked to dance, do you stay at the dance? That's why inclusion is the most important definition, because eventually lawyers get recruiter calls every day. Talent and acquisition folks at corporations call every day. If I'm never asked to dance, am I really going to stay here? That's why inclusion is so important. Next slide. The next slide talks about a whole bunch of diverse facts. I don't have to tell you, I'll just go over them quickly. Obviously, you know that the white population is diminishing in the United States and everybody else has a difference. There will always be a majority. Because I tell white people all the time, when you get diversity and you start talking about, I know it makes you nervous, but we can't do it without you. We cannot do it without you. If white people don't care, it will never progress. We'll still be talking about me 10 years from now being the only African-American female partner at my firm. You are just as important, and you should not feel that it is an indictment upon you when people talk about diversity. White folks, we cannot do it without you. Just like the abolitionists were there earlier on when Martin Luther King had the march, white folks were there. We can't do it, white folks, without you. Let's go to the next slide.
everybody. I'm Rachel Thompson. Quickly, a little bit about me. I am a 2019 alumni. I am a Greek American. My family's from Greece, a big fat Greek family. I am mama to an absolutely gorgeous 1.5-year-old little girl. I'm wife, attorney, everything. Sometimes it feels like. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. We're going to talk about appreciating D&I benefits. I have recently taken up baking as a form of stress relief. If you haven't yet tried that, definitely try it because it's really fun and the outcome might surprise you. So we're going to talk about D&I as baking and cake today. Think of diversity as the ingredients you have to make that. Think of inclusion as the actual cake, right? The end product. So diversity is the ingredients, inclusion is the cake. In regards to the ingredients, on their own, they're individual items with a singular taste. Like take flour, for example. On its own, not so good. As my 1-year-old would say, that's yucky. But flour, without it, you have a cake that's sweet and flat. So it's a necessary ingredient to make the cake that is a cake. So recognizing the value of each ingredient in the correct proportion, in the correct order, gets you something that is yummy, something that is a beautiful product at the end. So many people think that diversity is the action. You go out and you collect a diverse group of folks that's going to make your team effective and complete. But that's not where our message ends. See, the real goal is inclusion. And that's when you assemble all of your incredible ingredients to create something that's really magical that puts a smile on people's faces. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you can see on the screen, here are some benefits to diversity and inclusion. You know, different perspectives increase creativity. Different perspectives from different backgrounds bring about greater innovation. As Ruthie has talked about, the United States has changed. We are seeing an increased diversity, increased minority population. So our schools should be a reflection of the society that we live in. And in doing that, we attract more minorities, we attract minority students, we attract minority sponsors and minority employees. So it's really important that our school reflects the society that we live in. I also think that a big benefit to diversity and inclusion is that it fosters a sense of belonging with employees. You know, we feel more comfortable when we see that we're seen and valued. This leads to increased profits, positive reputation, improved decision-making. It's all around just a beneficial thing. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the things that I really love about South Texas professors is they have such a great way of talking about concept, philosophy, but it doesn't stop with them. We talk about the application too. How do we apply what we've learned? So the theory is, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, but let's talk about the application behind it. Applying what we've learned is a little tricky, and it's tricky because of this thing called implicit bias. Implicit bias is shorthand. It's our brain's quick way of trying to create and stuff people into categories so we can understand them, so we can understand the situation. It's our subconscious way of associating and believing and about a certain group, a social group, and sometimes you're not really even fully aware that you have these implicit biases. So as you can see, implicit bias takes both an internal and external form. Internal could be bias, stereotyping, prejudice. An example of stereotyping would be believing that all Asians are intelligent, or women are moody, or pregnant women are moody. Those are all forms of internal bias. It's a shortcut of our way of thinking. But these implicit biases can influence how we view certain people, which can eventually influence how we act towards certain people. And that's where we get into the realm of the external portion of implicit bias, where bias forms into discriminating, excluding someone because they're a group, they're a social group that we might not necessarily jive with. So the point is, when we're not aware of the potential impact that our social bias has, it can lead to discrimination, can lead to prejudice, which leads to lawsuits, and lawsuits are costly. And often tend to hurt our reputation. So if we can nip it in the bud ahead of time, we are much better off. Next slide. Turn it back to Ruthie.
This is my only exercise for today. And so for those of you who are virtual, we're gonna alternate back and forth so you get beauty in 2 different forms. One of the things I love about being here on earth, you know, of course, the daughter of a Baptist preacher, my daddy always told me, when you die and no one remembers you and you don't leave something that will carry on, then your life was in vain. And so one of the things that I've done as a lawyer is I've mentored several people. I give scholarships to South Texas College of Law, and I really am interested in women of color as a second career because that's what it was for me. I also get a high off of mentoring attorneys. That's why I'm excited about Rachel and did everything I can to get her in my firm because I think she has so much potential. And it makes me happy when I see her bloom in front of my eyes. As my dad said, give people their flowers while they're alive because they can't see them when you're at the funeral. And so I try to tell her at all times, like last minute, I want you to come and go present to me. I like to give her challenges too. I'm not sure she likes that, but that's okay. She'll learn from that. If you have a brain, you are biased. Period. If you don't have a brain, then you're not biased. And I don't like it when people try to minimize that they're biased. I'm biased. When I was dating, I wanted someone tall, dark, and handsome, preferably dark. And that's what I got. Because that's how I was raised, and that was how I thought when I was in UT as a freshman. The first white guy that asked me for a date, he said, "You want to go to the movies?" I said, "Oh yeah, who's going with us?" "Well, just us." I said, "Me and you?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Yeah, as a date?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, I have to think about that." He says, "Well, don't we have fun?" "Yeah, we study together." "Yeah, you like me, I like you. Don't you think I'm attractive?" "You are." "Well, why don't you go on a date?" "Now let's change the whole dynamics of family reunion. Give me a minute to think about this." I'm not sure I can do that. I don't even know what's gonna happen when I bring you home. So let me just think about this. That guy and I are still friends, but I never went on a date. Because growing up in a full African-American high school, only white people I saw were teachers and they loved me. So when I went to UT and I realized people didn't like black folks, I was in shock. I called my dad, "Come get me. I hate this place. They hate me. My biology professor says blacks are genetically inferior. I need to leave here." And my dad said to me, "You know what? You went to UT to learn. Sounds like you're learning." There is a bias there that if you have a brain, it's there. And so what happens is our brain takes 11 units of information and we shortcut it. We try to decide based on our background, our history, everything else that we're doing, what are we looking at? And of course, those shortcuts are based on your exposure. They've learned at 3 years old, girls, when you tell them to run like a girl, they run so flimsy. When you tell them to throw a ball like a girl, they throw a little flimsy ball. When they tell them to exercise like a girl, they kind of do a little flimsy stumble. And then you ask these same girls, "Now throw a ball like you throw." And they throw it hard and fast. Run like you normally run. And they run hard and fast. Why is it that 3-year-olds, when you add like a girl on them, change how they run? Change how they throw a ball. It's all because of their exposure. Let's go to the next slide. There's a paragraph for those of you who can read it. We're going to read it together. And for those of you here on Zoom, I don't know if you can read it or not, but let's see if you can. Let's try it. Let's start. "I couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. Using the incredible power of the human mind, according to the research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Amazing, huh? Your brain, because of your exposure and your history and what you've learned so far in your life, allowed you to read that. And what happens is you get these same shortcuts when you make decisions at work and the professional decisions you make. I represented Howard University in a case against a professor that had moved to Texas Tech. And I realized Texas Tech is one of the most white counties in Texas. And I said to my client, there's 2 Black women representing you in this trial. There's probably not going to be a Black juror in this trial. Tell me now, before we try the case, if you'd like for me to have a second chair who is white. My job is to do what's best for you and what's in the best interest of the client. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you tell me, I'd rather your second chair be white, Ruthie, because we're looking at white jurors. The great thing is I have a client that says, we trust you, Ruthie. If you think 2 Black lawyers can get a favorable jury verdict, go for it. And of course, when the jury pool came in, the general counsel Howard looked at me and said, you were right. I said, hey, I tell the truth to my clients. And when we won the trial, I asked the jury afterwards, is there anything I could do to better represent my client? And they said no. Prime example, there's a risk in Lubbock County trying a case with 2 Black women. But we ended up winning that case because somebody decided, I am going to take the time, because to get rid of biases requires intentional action. Otherwise, your brain will immediately do what you just read in that paragraph. It will go to a quick response, and it won't question the biases you have. The next slide is a picture of a bird. I was going to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it today. Look at the bottom, at the tail of the foot. So if you see the tail, end of the tail is a foot, you'll know the rest is a human. I just want to look at your brain. Next slide. I've already talked about some of the things that causes you to have biases, family history, personal experiences, historical influences, things of that nature. Of course, I told you my first time I went to UT as a freshman, a white lady and her daughter came into the dorm room. Keep in mind, I was loved by all the white people before I got to UT, because all my white people were teachers and they loved them some rhythm. So I didn't get anybody that was like me. The roommate and her mom came in and saw me. They said they were going to lunch. They never came back. I realized then that everybody is not going to like me. And it's simply, at times, because of my color. When I called my dad to say, come get me, I don't want to stay here, one of the things he said to me was that I failed you by not telling you that people will dislike you because of your color. So your mom and I did a disservice because we should have told you about racism a long time ago. When my son was young and he came home one day, Mom, I heard a real good song at school today. Sing it for me, Ed. I believe I will die. I was chased by the FBI. All I wanted was some chicken wings and a little bit of collard greens. I believe I will die. My son was 7 years old. My husband and I looked at each other. And my husband, of course, said, this is one of those looks, you handling this, or do you want me to handle this? Because we get to hear like Kincaid today, right? He has a totally different philosophy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But our children are not going to be guinea pigs to help someone to understand that Black is not a disservice or diminished. So I told my son, babe, you know how you like Tiger Woods? He said, yeah, Mom. Wanted you to get on the computer, put in Tiger Woods, collard greens, and chicken. So he goes to his room, he comes back and he says, Mom, when Tiger Woods won the Masters, they said, are we gonna have collard greens and chicken in the clubhouse now? Did they do it because he's brown, Mom? And I had to, at 6 years old, explain racism to my child, which hurt me to my heart. Because I knew then, we can afford to go to Kincaid, we can live in a nice neighborhood, we have an education. But that will still not prevent folks determining my son's future because of his color. I said at the beginning of this presentation, do you care? Because if you don't care, none of this matters. Only you can determine that. There are different types of biases. I have on the screen several of them, and I'm not gonna go through all of them today. Call me if you want to talk about them. We're just gonna go through a couple. Confirmation bias. This is when you cherry pick evidence to back up your preconception. You already decided you like soul food. You love this. I hate soul food. For those of you who know, and it's in soul food. What's the best soul food restaurant? I can tell you where a soul food restaurant is. I can't tell you if it's good because I don't eat soul food. Same thing when you ask Hispanic people, what's a good Mexican restaurant? Or you say, you don't speak Spanish? You're Hispanic? Boy, your parents did you wrong. Again, you have a bias, right? And you don't even think about it. Halo bias. Halo bias is when someone makes a first impression and everything after that you decided is positive. Hey, horn bias when someone makes a bad impression and everything about that you think is negative. For instance, if you interview someone and you decide to hire them, the first time they don't return your call, you say, oh, she's busy. He's probably busy. The person you didn't like, the first time they don't return your call, well, we need to write him up. You know, he can't return phone calls. Maybe he doesn't belong here. Those are the type of biases that occur. Stereotyping, I don't have to go over, you know that quite well. Affinity, I shouldn't go have to go over. Affinity is the easiest bias because you migrate toward people like you. Because it's easy. And most of us have busy lives. And so the next time we have a cocktail party, no one thinks to look at, that might everybody look like me, talk like me. Or they are normalizing my abnormal behavior because their circle of knowledge is about the same as mine. If you want pats on the back, that's good. Get with people who are like you. You won't even know you're wrong when we come up with crazy stuff because they're just like you. Hopefully you want to expand your circle of knowledge so that you understand there's a different way of looking at things. Anchor bias, go to the next slide. Anchor bias, I give the analogy of the sticker price on a car. You decide your satisfaction and how happy you are in buying that car based on how much you got out of the sticker price. If I didn't get $5,000 sticker price, I didn't do a good job. Confirmation bias. I got the Buick ad. You remember Buick first decided that young people not buying our cars because all they think about is old people drive Buicks. We got to change that. So they came up with a commercial of a young person saying, I'm coming out, where are you? I'm out front. I don't see your car. I don't see your car. Blink your lights. Oh, she's driving a Buick. Trying to get young people to see. Don't confirm that a Buick is that old people car that old people drive. We need young people to make more money to do this. The Voice I have as a slide here. I love The Voice. It's one of my favorite shows. And if many of you have not seen it, the judges do not see who is singing until they turn around. And there have been plenty of surprises. Some of the judges are just really showing their backs. They're like, oh, when they turn around and see there's someone they didn't even imagine would sing like that. What if we did that to resumes? There was a study done, and 2 resumes, 2 men, one was called Jamal so-and-so, the other one was called Hunter so-and-so. Same information. Another study was done where the girl was called Caitlin and the other was called Lakeisha. And they wanted to see how often would they get callbacks. And many of you can appreciate what happened. Lakeisha and Jamal got less callbacks. Keep in mind the information on the resumes were the same. Lakeisha and Jamal got less callbacks. And you ask yourself, why is the information the same? I tell a lot of my clients, I want you to have a voice resume. Those who are not decision makers, clean that resume. Anything that indicates the race, the gender, the religion, or anything on those resumes, take it off before the decision maker sees it. So their short list is based upon something that's not going to lean toward their bias. That's one way of getting rid of biases. Next slide. Microaggressions, if you haven't heard about it, you're going to hear about it today. It's a different form. It's like an everyday verbal, a nonverbal environment. I have a federal judge here, a female federal judge in the city, who is a good friend of mine, and she says whenever she gets a letter from a law student about a candidate, she knows from the cover letter, if they use the word articulate, they're talking about a person of color. He is so articulate. And you don't hear that a lot of white folks. Oh, they're so articulate, because it's assumed that if I'm considering you, you're articulate. And she told me, Ruth, sometimes I just play a game, bring them in and see if I'm right. And every time, if the cover letter has articulate, it's a candidate of color. They can work against you sometimes. I do believe the reason all of my mentors have been white males and I have done better, some of their biases, they're so surprised. We didn't think Ruthie was going to win that trial. We didn't think Ruthie would get that client. She has to be really good, and they don't even realize their own microaggressions have decided there's no way she can do it. Now, I call the conscious in every law firm that I go to. And when they ask me, well, we don't think this person can do well. And I said, why? Well, this is the reason. Well, you guys fail all the time. I've never seen not hiring another white male because the last one failed. I never had these discussions. It means the white man failed the last time, and we don't want to set him up to fail, so we're not hiring any more white men. You have to understand that if you have this bias and this microaggression, it has to be intentional, or your inclination is to do what's fast and easy. Rachel, you're on.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit how to analyze and calibrate some of what we've learned and applied in our workplace. Next slide. So a really big important step is understanding that leadership really needs to acknowledge that diversity and inclusion, they're not just HR issues. This is an issue that affects every single one of us, every single employee, student, everyone in our school. So we need to really take an honest look at who our workforce is. Knowledge is power. Understanding the data behind who makes up our workforce is going to give us the necessary information in order to further our diversity plan. So how do we do that? The best way to do it is surveys. You know, one-on-one conversations, department meetings, town hall conversations. These are all great ways to collect data and see if our efforts are being matched. Next slide, please. Another fantastic way of incorporating diversity and inclusion and reminding employees that it's really important is training. Training is so important. Last week we did a training with one of our clients, and it was so cool to see some of the employees, like where they were at the beginning of the training to where they were at the end. It's like they clicked with them, the law, their obligations. They understood how the responsibilities in respecting each other in the workplace. So employers really should provide training about diversity and inclusion to all employees. So this includes employees in their supervisory role and non-supervisory. Some other forms of training would be basic employment law, you know, the elements of a discrimination claim, retaliation claim, harassment claim, ways to avoid implicit bias, which is kind of what we're talking about today, and ways to interrupt that bias. The training should really focus on how employees play a role in their DEI efforts. It's like I said, you know, once we become aware of our obligations, I think it's easier to know what our role is in stopping and interrupting our biases. For supervisory employees, it's really important that they have additional training regarding their legal obligations. And then it's not enough just to know your obligations, you also have to model that behavior, which is really difficult. So we encourage to have a little more training for those in a supervisory capacity. Next slide. So we're going to talk about bias busters. These are ways to interrupt the biases that we have. And this is really hard for us. So it sometimes takes us to having to slow down and analyze a situation to be able to interrupt what our mind automatically wants to go ahead and do. The first tip is to avoid snap judgments and put first impressions aside. They say that within meeting a person, you have made up your mind about that person within 10 seconds of meeting them. And I don't know about you all, but there is so much more to me than just 10 seconds. So if we know that about ourselves, I think we should give the person we're meeting more than just 10 seconds to make up our mind about them. Ask yourself, if I put aside my first impressions, would I make that same decision about that person another time? Focus on the facts. You know, you can make your conclusions after you have found out all the facts in a situation. That's especially true if we have employees complaining or employees reporting an incident. You know, challenge yourself to really slow down and make those measured decisions. For some of you that tend to lean on the external side of implicit bias, meaning that, you know, you have no problem with sharing a joke or a comment that might be kind of on the edge, we would advise just to maybe not make that comment. One of Ruthie's favorite sayings, and it's developed into my favorite saying as well, is, you know, when in doubt, don't. So if you're leaning towards making a comment that goes towards someone's protected trait, you know, their race, sex, disability, then we would just encourage you maybe not to make that joke or comment, even if you have a personal relationship with that person. Another really kind of cool tool is the Harvard Implicit Association Test. So you can go online and then see where some of your biases might lie in some of these questions that the test comes up with. Two kind of interesting ones that Harvard, the test was able to show is that 76 associate men with a career and women with family. 75% prefer white generally over Black people. So you would think that, you know, in 2021, some of these biases would go away, but unfortunately they're still here with our society. So what can we do? We can learn how to interrupt our biases when they come about. Next slide.
These potatoes, but that's okay, that's a good thing. The next part is about recruiting. And I represent employers in labor and employment cases. So most of the people who are my clients eliminate that word good fit or that phrase good fit. I have been in too many trials where that good fit category is an exhibit 1 in the opening statement. And the lawyer will say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're not here to determine if corporation ABC discriminated against my client. They rated her low on good fit. And you know what that fit was for them? The white male who plays golf, that can drink you under the table and can say the same curse words that you do and misogynize women. Because those are all the people that you'll hear people on the stand, right and left, tell you what their traits are. So what is good fit? I tell my client, when you put good fit as a category, what does that mean? You explain it, and most of them, before they meet me, well, I think it means you can get along with everybody. See? As soon as you say, I think it means, under the penalty of perjury, subject to jail time or fines, you need to know what good fit means. So why don't we just take good fit out? And let's define it, first of all, if we're talking about cultural fit, what is that? And then let's define it, if that's what you want to put as a qualifier for who you want to hire. We already talked about the voice resumes. Try that again to try to eliminate diversity. And we've talked about the study that was given before with the two folks who had the same information. They just didn't give the same callbacks. My niece's first name is Shanika. She wanted a job. She lives in Dallas. And she says, I'm Ruthie. No one's calling me for an interview. Her middle name is Nicole. And keep in mind, this is 2020. This was last year. I said, change your resume to S. Nicole last name. Do you really think I'm Ruthie? That's going to be a problem. We won't know until we try it. You say you're not getting callbacks. S. Nicole last name instead of Shanika Nicole last name. My niece now was hired by the Dallas Community College, and she has over a $10 million budget dealing with her philanthropic efforts. But the reason we'll never know, did she get that job because she changed her resume to S. Nicole last name or not? All we do know for sure is her name is Shanika. And she's doing a fantastic job. Her boss has put her as the employee of the year. But would that have ever happened if she hadn't changed her resume? I don't know. But those are the things you'll have to consider in your organization when you are considering candidates. Does that name make a difference? I've had lawsuits, unfortunately, where an HR assistant told me the manager, if he saw any HBCU, the resume went into the trash. If he saw a zip code in the city that he knew was predominantly Black, the resume would go in the trash. Only when we started talking about the penalty of perjury did she say, well, I'm gonna tell you what happened. She's been with the company for 6 years, so this has been going on for 6 years. And of course, I told my client, you need to settle this case. You need to settle this case, you need to settle this case now. So those people who believe that racism doesn't exist surprise me. And I ask myself, why do they believe it doesn't exist? I ask those of you who are listening, get friends from all different cultures or ethnicities. I made a point of making sure that my son's friends were like the United Nations meeting, because I wanted to change the next generation. Now, when he started being friends with Ashkan, I didn't know why, and I asked my husband, I said, why is he no longer friends with Ashkan? Babe, stay out of it. Well, I'm gonna ask him, because I made a point of getting United Nations as friends. If you went to his wedding, you could see the whole United Nations were up there in the crowd. Why is Ashkan out there? I found out later Ashkan is selling weed, so okay, we don't need to be friends with Ashkan anymore. We can find another Iranian person that he can be friends with. But the point is, expand your own self. If you see that all the people you go to lunch with are people like you, step outside of yourself. You'll never learn about diversity, equity, and inclusion if you just hang around people like you. Make a decision today that the next time I invite someone to lunch, I'm gonna invite someone who's totally different than me. I may learn something as far as this diversity, equity, and inclusion journey is concerned. And I want to do that. Recruiting is the most important. Someone has to start questioning folks. Looks like everybody you hire are all white people. Why? Someone has to start, because then your bias automatically is what's easy. Someone has to start questioning you. Get yourself an accountability coach. That person, when you bounce them, what do you think about this? They will question whether you're leaning towards your biases or not. And let's try to do that.
So we're going to talk a little bit about compensation. Can I do the next slide? Compensation is another area where bias tends to rear its ugly head, and it's also an area where we also tend not to think that there might be bias. So in order to understand if there is bias in compensating certain employees, we should conduct a compensation analysis under privilege, of course. So what does this look like? It looks like obtaining salary information about the reasons why certain employees that are similarly situated to each other have different pay. So for an example, if you have two receptionists, both reporting to the same supervisor, same job duties, one might be African American, one is Caucasian. If there's any type of pay difference between them, we need to understand why there is a pay difference in order to rectify some of that bias, if there is bias. So another way to kind of control bias within compensation is creating a strategy, one that everybody can follow. Part of the strategy might be eliminating prior salaries. So what does that mean? It means maybe stop using salary histories in hiring. Determining an employee's previous salary from their previous job and then carrying that forward into this job might be inadvertently carrying the discrimination from one job into this job. That's something that might not be considered often. It's a really good idea to set clear expectations for compensations. All employees should be able to know what it takes to earn a certain salary, what job qualities, what job duties they should be using to get to a certain compensation level. And most importantly, their work should be valued. So if you're doing the job, you should get paid accordingly. Biases aside. It's really important that when implementing this strategy, all exceptions and discretion, especially managerial discretion, is kind of put to the side, meaning that when we're all on the same page about our compensation strategy, there is less chance of a lawsuit. There's less chance for one person to kind of diverge from the group and change compensation away from the strategy. So it's really important that everybody sticks to the strategy to kind of avoid some problems later in the future. Turning it back over to Ruthie for performance.
Well, another diversity issue, as we're getting up and down, I don't know if you noticed, I have a hard copy version of the slides within a binder, and Rachel has her iPad. That's another example of diversity, believe it or not. I haven't gotten there yet, but again, the reason you have that diversity, as Rachel mentioned earlier, there's so many benefits that come from it. Let's talk about diversity and inclusion as it relates to performance. This one happens all the time. You know how that male who screams and throws things, but he gets the results the company wants? He's passionate. That's the word they use. The first time a woman screams, oh, she's angry. Oh, her emotions are out of check. We need to talk to her because, I don't know about that. And most women are conditioned, especially women in law firms, are conditioned that I can't tell you everything I'm thinking because you may think I'm an angry woman. And I got to talk about, as to, well, you need to keep your emotions in check. So I have to be very deliberate in what I say because I don't want the biases to click in. Does that make sense? So what I've done a lot of times, and I tell some of my mentees, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, if they have to do it differently, the point is to win the war, and the point is to win the battle, and the point is to succeed. You may just have to pause. A lot of times when I'm doing this in meeting, I'm really praying because I'm trying to pray, Lord, help me not to say what I really want to say. So sometimes you have to do that. But you pause, and I've learned the best thing that I have done when it comes to dealing with opposing counsel, for instance, and they're just raising Cain on the phone, just screaming and hollering like a banshee. And finally, they wait for me to respond, and they don't get anything. Ruthie, are you there? I said, I'm there. I'm here. Well, did you hear me? I said, you know what? I'm really trying to decide, should I follow my dad's advice? Because he told me when I was 16, the first time my boyfriend told me out, baby, the good thing about a phone is if you don't like what you're hearing on the other side, hang up. And I said to opposing counsel, I'm really trying not to follow my dad's advice, but I understand that this is how you do things, and that's okay. We're starting to repeat ourselves, and you're getting louder and louder and louder, as if the tone and volume of your voice is going to change my mind. And I'm okay. Everybody has to process a different way. But please know what I said 15 minutes ago is the same thing I'm going to say now. Up to you whether you want to talk another 30 minutes. I need you to get cleansed so we can go on and progress in this case. But you see it all the time. You see it all the time where people subconsciously, and I love it because being an equity partner at the last 2 law firms, 3 that I've been in, being in the room helps to bring that out to the other folks because they never think about it. They really don't. When I was in a corporation, well, we shouldn't send her overseas. She has 2 little kids. Well, isn't that her choice? Maybe her kids would love to go to London. Why are you considering that in whether she should go on the assignment? Being in the room helped that. I've been in the room with white males for down, saying to me about discrimination. A part of my career, I had to work in New York with my Southern voice. There's a lot of discrimination against Southerners. And I said to him, I agree that's wrong. Let's make sure we're in different states. Unless you open your mouth, they don't know you're Southern. When I walk into a room, most people, at least the ones that aren't blind, know I'm black. So we're in a different state. Everybody has to deal with some discrimination, but appreciate they're not the same. I tell that to my white female friends. Ruthie, our journey, well, we have a journey that's alike quite a bit. Some of our journey is different. While you're arguing with your husband as to why women can't get a certain tea time, I'm telling my children why they can't be a member of the club. There's some similarities, but there are some differences. I can't just go and retire in every little quaint city in the United States. That city may not want people there, there that look like me. No matter how hard I work, how much money I make, how comfortable I can be retiring, I have to make sure that city, quaint as it is not going to be a horrific experience for us because we're the first Black people that moved there. And I know it offends people when they hear white privilege because it sounds like it means I didn't get where I am because I didn't work hard. Or it sounds like it means you're not understanding that I work too. That's not what white privilege is. I wish there was another term for it. I haven't come up with one, but there is one. And I tell folks, when you started work day one, you had a critical mass of people there look just like you. Didn't have to do anything for it. Didn't have to work hard for it. It was there when you walked in the door. That's white privilege. When you want to retire to any little small town in the United States, you don't have to sit and wonder, what if they're like white people? White privilege. So it's not about working, it's just benefits you get simply by being white. Not that you're not working hard or anything like that. I tell white people all the time, we cannot progress in diversity, equity, and inclusion without you. But it's okay to say, I am a recovering racist. You're not the only one. I can't think of a person of color that can't say it if you grew up in the United States. There are things that you learn, whether you know it or not, that makes you a recovering racist. So performance falls into that too, and unless you recognize that, again, what someone else does, you kind of brush it off, oh, they work hard. What another person does, you dissect, and you have to ask yourself, are my biases coming into play?
We're getting close to time, but we'll briefly talk about sponsorship, which is a really great way to include some of the members of our diverse group. So what is sponsorship? A lot of people think that sponsorship and mentorship are one and the same, but they're actually two very different things. A mentor can be anybody in a position of experience. Sponsor is usually a senior level executive. It's usually a higher up within your organization. Mentors help build a career. Sponsors drive their protege's career. Mentors suggest ways to expand their mentees' network. Sponsors give proteges their active network and make new connections with them. Sponsors are personally vested in the upward movement and professional development of their protege. They champion their protege's visibility. So one thing is, if it's not, don't just assume that sponsorships occur organically. I'm very thankful that my sponsorship with Ruthie has occurred organically, but there are some things that we can do to advocate for a sponsorship program. One of the things is to make it a priority. You know, find somebody that you know you like, that is very receptive towards teaching. Maybe somebody that holds similar values to you. Create a formal sponsorship program. That's also another really great way to advocate sponsorship. And then implement formal succession planning. I really think the Harvard Business Review kind of summed up why sponsorship is so important. And they said sponsorship can help catapult junior talent into top management, while also greatly expanding the reach and impact of senior leadership. But only when both sponsor and protege recognize that it's a mutually beneficial alliance, a truly two-way street. So it's really important. I'll hand it back to Ruthie to do our takeaways.
We're on the last slide, guys, so that's great. And I'm so glad that people are here in the room, and I'm glad for those of you who are online make my day, because for you to sign up for this, I am going to assume it's not because of the CLE, it's because you care. My son has graduated from college, and he's an engineer with the Williams Company. And one of the things they do every year is they have the new engineers oversee the United Way campaign. And right before COVID hit, he was responsible for chairing the committee for the United Way campaign. And I did him a disservice because I had to say to him what I had to say to my father when I went to UT. He called me and he said, "Mom, are you busy?" I said, "Of course not, Evan, what's up?" "I'm here at the golf club, Mom," and I was so excited because my committee raised more money for United Way than any other committee at the Williams Company. As I was walking to my truck, an older white couple said, "We're late for lunch. Can you take our golf clubs and put them in the golf locker room for us?" And he said, "Mom, they thought I worked here." And from now on, Mom, I'm wearing a Williams Company polo shirt whenever I go to a company event. And I could tell his voice was cracking. And I said to him, "Evan," I told him about my U2 experience, and I said, "Evan, I'm having to say to you what Paul said to me. I've done you a disservice because I haven't made it a highlight of how people will see you without knowing you. But son, I will tell you what Paul told me. You don't have a choice but to succeed. Your job and why God put you on the face of this earth was for you to blaze a trail for the people behind you. You are not blessed to bless yourself. You are blessed to bless others, and you cannot do it because that's not the child I raised." So I said to him, now he's been at the Williams Company for 3 years and just was promoted as the youngest engineering manager at the Williams Company. I'm gonna say so myself. He has 10 engineers reporting to him, and he said to me, "Mom, do you think people will think I got the job because I'm Black?" And I honestly said to him, "Of course they will. Trust me, there will people who will believe that you got the job because you're Black." And I said to him, "I would give you the benefit of the doubt that you're not gonna let that stop you, son. You know how you got the job. You know why you got the job. 20 people applied for the job. 6 people were interviewed for the job. Your boss was promoted. She had already said, 'I want Evan to replace me,' and she was a white female. Her boss is a white male who did a project with Evan the year before and said he's phenomenal. Phenomenal, man, but I agree with you. But let's go through the process and make sure there's nobody more qualified than it." And Evan got the job, but there will always be someone who will think, and it will go on, son, until you die, that you got the job because you're Black. So I started this presentation by saying, do you care about diversity, equity, and inclusion? And if you don't care, then none of this matters. It really doesn't matter. It's important for you to understand also that we don't need everyone to care, because that's impossible. It can't happen. We need just enough to get to our destination. So we need enough people on the bus to get to the destination, or we need people who aren't on the bus to care about the destination for us to get there. So I hope I'm talking to people who care, because again, you can get the CLE credit, but none of this matters if you don't care. I hope people who are online care, because again, none of this matters if you don't care. If you care, do what we said today. You have to be intentional. This doesn't happen naturally. Most of us have busy lives, and so if you're not intentional, you will easily migrate to what you've done all along. You have to be accountable and make other people accountable for some of their actions. You have to model the behavior you say, message it in a way that doesn't offend or alienate folks. As I said before, if white people don't join, there's no way we can join. If I've said something uncomfortable today for you, then I've done my job. You cannot talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion unless there's something said that makes you uncomfortable. And that's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be concerned about these discussions. It's not okay to ignore it. I wish you all well. I am glad that you allowed an African-American partner at a law firm who's the daughter of a Baptist pastor, a wife, mother, sister, a Christian, a voluptuous, gorgeous woman who is intelligent and witty, along with another female who is the mother of a 1-year-old, who is an associate at a law firm, and is the glory of my life sometimes because she's my second hand, and of course reminds me of everything that I've forgotten the day before. The combination is better than it would be if it wasn't both of us. There are benefits to it. Thank you so much for joining us. I apologize that we're about 5 minutes behind schedule, but hopefully you enjoyed it and learned something. I hope all of you have a good day.